On November 26th of 2008, skeletal remains belonging to an unknown female were found just west of White Swan in Yakima County, Washington. The Yakima National Tribal Police and Yakima County Coroner's Office investigated the case and worked to pursue all leads available. Forensic DNA testing was attempted to identify the woman, but the remains were not enough to yield a usable DNA profile. Without a DNA profile, and with all leads exhausted, the case eventually went cold. With investigators unable to identify the woman, she was named the Yakima County Jane Doe. Then, in 2022, when DNA technology was a lot more advanced, the Yakima County Coroner's Office teamed with Othram to leverage advanced DNA testing to identify the unknown woman. Othram is a Texas-based laboratory. The skeletal remains of the Yakima County Jane Doe were sent to Othram, and their scientists were able to produce a usable DNA extract. Funding for Othram's DNA testing work was provided by the Washington State Attorney General's Office. The lab used forensic-grade genome sequencing to develop a comprehensive DNA profile. Through an investigation by the Yakima County Coroner's Office, a familial reference DNA sample was provided, and Othram used familial testing to confirm the suspected relationship between the reference sample and the DNA profile of the unknown woman. This whole process finally led to the Yakima County Coroner's Office being able to announce that the Jane Doe is Daisy Mae Tallman on January 4th of 2023. She was born on January 10th of 1958. Daisy was staying with family in the White Swan area of the Yakima Indian Reservation at the time of her disappearance. Her keys and backpack were later found in the closed area of the reservation, known as Soda Springs. Daisy was a citizen of the Confederated Tribes and Bands of the Yakima Nation. Daisy was last seen on August 30th and was reported missing on October 29th of 1987. She would have been 29 years old at the time she went missing. The Yakima County Coroner's Office offered their condolences to the family and friends of Daisy. Investigators are still trying to find out what happened after she disappeared that led to her body being found. Daisy's name is included among 16 other indigenous women whose bodies were found or declared missing from the Yakima Reservation between 1980 and 1992. On March 13th of 1973, a man's lifeless body was found by fishermen floating in the Saginaw River in Zilwaukee, Michigan. Autopsy results indicated that the man had been shot 7 times and had blunt force trauma to the back of his head. The medical examiner suspected he had been knocked down, shot, and discarded about 6 weeks before the fishermen found him. Within a year, with nothing further for detectives to investigate, the man was buried in a grave marked John Doe. The case remained cold until 2020, when the Michigan State Police Cold Case Team and their Missing Persons Coordination Unit reopened it. They exhumed the body for advanced DNA testing and sent the remains to the Michigan State University Department of Anthropology for re-examination. In late 2021, with help from the nonprofit DNA Doe Project, Inc., previously obtained hair samples and a new bone sample from the John Doe were sent to Santa Cruz, California-based Estrella Forensics for forensic genetic genealogy. In 2022, a possible familial match was located with collaboration from the DNA Doe Project. The connection linked the unidentified remains to a family in Beeville, Texas. With the assistance of the Texas Rangers, the family was informed of the possible identification, and investigators obtained familial DNA reference samples from several family members that were sent to the FBI DNA lab for comparison. The FBI confirmed that the remains were those of Daniel G Garza-Gonzales. He was 28 years old when his life was taken. The identification was announced on January 5th of 2023. Daniel was a Vietnam War veteran who was wounded during the conflict. After returning to America, he left Fort Worth, Texas, hoping to find work in Flint, Michigan. His family never heard from him again. Forensic genealogist and team leader Corrine Binder of the DNA Doe Project had this to say: "We are thankful that when we reached an impasse in our research, some cousins of Daniel stepped up to help by submitting DNA and uploading it to GED Match to assist our team in identifying him. Our team will put in as many hours as it takes until the case is solved. Anyone with information about Daniel's slaying is asked to call Michigan State Police Detective Sergeant Bill Arndt at 989-615-6257. On July 24th of the year 2000, remains belonging to an unknown male were found 27 miles off the coast of Maine near Grand Manan Banks. Fingerprints and DNA samples were taken. The fingerprints were submitted to the FBI but did not produce any matches. The DNA sample was uploaded to the FBI's combined DNA index but was not matched. No leads were found, and the case went cold for many years. In 2019, the Office of Chief Medical Examiner contacted Parabon Nanolabs to analyze the DNA and attempt forensic genealogy. Parabon analyzed a DNA sample and learned that the man was Jewish, but still did not know who he was. However, in March of 2022, the FBI's Criminal Justice Information Services and Deceased Persons Identification Services Division got involved. The unidentified person's fingerprints were then submitted in May of 2022. On January 11th of 2023, it was announced that the remains found belonged to 84-year-old Phillip Kahn. The FBI was able to match the fingerprints and dental records to Phillip, who had been reported missing in Las Vegas in the year 2000. His next of kin has been notified of the identification. Phillip left Las Vegas, Nevada, and landed in New York City in July of 2000. It remains unknown why or how he ended up off the coast of Maine. On October 27th of 1997, Michigan State police officers responded to an area near Fox Farm Road in Manistee County after a report of a deceased and unclothed woman who appeared to have washed up on shore. There was nothing to identify the woman at the time other than one earring. An autopsy determined the woman was not alive anymore due to drowning and appeared to be an accident. In September of 2020, detectives with the Michigan State Police Cadillac Post and the department's Missing Persons Coordination Unit re-examined the case and exhumed the woman for advanced DNA testing. Bone samples were sent to Estrella Forensics under the DNA Doe Project for forensic genetic genealogy. In July of 2021, a possible familial match was located. The names were supplied from the DNA Doe Project to the Michigan State Police for vetting. The DNA Doe Project uses investigative genetic genealogy, which results in the generation of leads to identify the deceased. The possible connection linked the remains to the Ting family in Action, Maine. Familial DNA reference samples from a possible brother were then obtained. Finally, the Michigan State Police announced on January 9th of 2023 that the Jane Doe is 26-year-old Dorothy Lynn Thing Ricker. Dorothy was last seen in Wisconsin on October 2nd of 1997 at 12:30 p.m. by officers with the St. Francis Police Department. When contacted by officers, Dorothy had not yet been reported as missing and nothing appeared abnormal. The following day, an abandoned vehicle was found nearby, and its license plate came back to a missing/endangered person entered by the Chicago Police Department. Investigators are currently trying to determine whether Dorothy's drowning was accidental, whether she took her own life, or if foul play is involved. The remains of an unknown female were found on October 6th of 1971 in Bedford, New Hampshire. It was at the end of Kilton Road, near the Route 101 bypass. Investigators determined that her life ended 3 months before she was found. They were unable to identify her. They figured that she was white, aged between 25 and 35, between 61 and 65 inches tall, and had brown hair. She was found wearing a maroon pullover blouse and lace at the neck, short hip-hugger dungaree-type shorts, size 7 sandals, and no identification. The cause could not be determined by investigators, but they were convinced that someone took her life. For approximately 50 years, her identity remained unknown. Then, state cops worked with the DNA Doe Project between 2020 and 2022 to use genetic genealogy to try to link the body to a family member. They finally managed to do so because a Texas-based member of her family did a direct-to-consumer DNA test. Investigators then believed the unidentified woman is Catherine Ann Alston. Her friends called her Kathy. Investigators contacted Kathy's family, and after further testing, confirmed the match in 2023. Kathy was a Massachusetts native, born in the city of Chelsea in 1945. She graduated from Dorchester High School in 1963 and went to Boston University. She married fellow student Ralph Lawson Garrett Jr. in 1967. They divorced, but investigators said there is no evidence to suggest the divorce was not amicable. Garrett has since passed away. Kathy was 26 when she went missing from Boston, Massachusetts in 1971. Authorities said her parents and siblings moved to Texas, where her father's family was from, that same year. Kathy was supposed to meet them at the Logan airport for their flight, but she did not show up, her siblings said. The siblings said that they never saw or spoke with her after they moved to Texas. Interestingly, no one ever reported Kathy as missing. Investigators did not identify her roommate as a suspect, but identified him as David Cormier. Kathy and David lived together at 36 Beacon Street in Boston, Massachusetts at the time she was last seen. Investigators are seeking information from anyone who knew Kathy or David Cormier. Those more likely to have known either of them were people who lived in Boston, Dorchester, and Somerville between 1963 and the fall of 1971. Authorities suggest students who went to Boston University between 1963 and 1967 may also remember Kathy. New Hampshire Attorney General John M. Fromella had this to say in January of 2023. Today's announcement by our cold case unit is very important, and I am proud of their difficult and very diligent work. It demonstrates our unwavering commitment to the pursuit of justice for Miss Alston, her family, and for all the New Hampshire crime victims. We are determined to stay on this case, and we will work tirelessly with our law enforcement partners to follow any leads that may help us determine who might be responsible for what happened to Miss Alston. In 2019, a homeowner in Jefferson County, Tennessee, reported a suspicious bag along the shore of Douglas Lake to Jefferson County Sheriff's Office deputies. Deputies arrived at the scene and determined the bag, which turned out to be a golf bag, contained human remains belonging to a man. At first, Investigators were unable to determine the John Doe's race, age, or even how long he's been not alive. Officials brought the case to the DNA Doe Project in 2020, and they assisted with the identification. Team member Eric Hendershot had this to say: "Early on in the research, we were able to identify one set of his grandparents rather quickly. However, identifying his other set of grandparents took almost another year. A team had found an obituary that connected a number of DNA matches and was able to identify the John Doe's biological parents, but the obituary did not list any children. A biological relative confirmed that all of the children in the family had been placed up for adoption and provided information that the DNA Doe Project team said helped them resolve the case. In January of 2023, it was announced that the John Doe is Earl Joseph Pizzoferrato of Knoxville, Tennessee. The fact that he was put up for adoption made his identification much harder. The investigation into what exactly happened to Earl Pizzoferrato remains ongoing. Anyone with information regarding this case is asked to call 1-800-TBI-FIND. That's 1-800-TBI-FIND. On October 26th of 1998, a man's body was discovered in the Columbia River in Vancouver, Canada. The Clark County Medical Examiner's Office could only determine that he was white and possibly in his 50s. Recently, the Medical Examiner's Office submitted a DNA sample from the remains to Bode Technology. They are a DNA laboratory in Virginia that provides forensic genealogy services and specializes in the extraction of DNA from challenging human remains samples. The forensic genealogist used the DNA from the remains to predict the unidentified person's ancestry and compared it to individuals in online genealogy databases that allow searches for unidentified persons. The forensic genealogist found an ancestral link to a family from California. While there were multiple possibilities, the forensic genealogist noted that one person, a son of Chesley Johnson Jr. and Ruth Marie Hansen, appeared to have no traceable activities since 1998. In October of 2022, Medical Examiner's Office Operations Manager Nikki Costa contacted other children of the couple. Russell Johnson and Kathy Bergen indicated their brother, Michael E. Johnson, had left California over 20 years ago and had no contact with family. Over the next several months, Costa reached out to other agencies for assistance as she pursued the lead. Since Michael was missing from California, the California Department of Justice Missing Persons DNA program provided analysis of family reference samples for comparison to the unidentified male in Clark County. The Wasatch County Sheriff's Office in Heber City, Utah, collected a DNA sample from Johnson's sister, Kathy Bergen, and submitted the family reference sample to California's Missing Persons program. The University of North Texas Center for Human Identification, which developed the initial DNA profile of the unidentified male in 2008, sent its DNA profile to California's Missing Persons program for comparison. Based on the results of the forensic genealogical analysis, DNA analysis, and circumstantial evidence in the case, Clark County Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Martha Burt concluded that the previously unidentified man was Michael E. Johnson in 2023. It was revealed that Michael had been fatally shot in the head. Law enforcement has no information on Michael's activities or travels leading up to the recovery of his body floating in the Columbia River near Lower River Road. Anyone with information about Michael can contact Vancouver Police Department Major Crimes Unit Sergeant Patrick Moore at 360-487-7440. Michael was 53 years old when his life was taken. Here is a picture of him and his wife, Joyce, that was taken sometime in the 1990s. The remains of an unknown woman were found by 3 hunters on January 23rd of 1971 off Hackberry Road in a remote desert area in Mojave County, Arizona. She was found discarded inside a white, loosely woven canvas sack, tied at the top with a rope. Several items of clothing were also discovered with her body, and they are shown in this picture. The woman was described as Caucasian and between the ages of 35 and 40 years old. She measured at 5 foot 4 inches tall and was estimated to weigh between 125 and 140 pounds. The woman had curly hair that was dark brown with some gray in it. She had a long scar on her stomach, possibly a cesarean scar. A bone indentation on her ring finger meant that the woman likely wore a wedding ring. It was determined that the woman had been strangled. Unfortunately, she could not be identified and was named the Mojave Jane Doe. Over the years, investigators with the Mojave County Sheriff's Office conducted a thorough investigation and explored several different avenues in an effort to identify the woman. Her fingerprints were sent to the Federal Bureau of Investigation in Washington, D.C., but no immediate matches could be made. Investigators estimated that her life was taken near the end of December of 1970, about a month before her body was found. Arizona, Utah, Nevada, and California missing persons reports were all checked. Investigators even inquired with local stores, motels, and hotels. The Mojave County Sheriff's Office contacted the Museum of Northern Arizona to have an artist use the woman's skull to create a sketch of what the Mojave Jane Doe may have looked like in life. Unfortunately, none of those attempts brought investigators any closer to discovering the woman's name. The case then went cold, but finally, in November of 2021, Mojave Jane Doe's case was entered into NamUs, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. The Mojave County Sheriff's Office partnered with Othram in 2022 to successfully crack the case and identify the victim in 2023. On January 23rd of 2023, her identity was officially announced as Colleen Audrey Rice. The identification was made possible through crowdfunding set up by Othram to raise the money needed to conduct the necessary testing and research. It was hoped that the community would step up and help bring about justice and a name for the Mojave Jane Doe. The Mojave County Sheriff's Office dedicated $1,000 and the wider community donated the remaining $6,500 within 5 days. Advanced DNA testing and investigative genetic genealogy was carried out, and DNA comparison to a family member's DNA confirmed the results. Colleen Audrey Rice was born in Portsmouth, Ohio, to parents James C. Rice and Flossie Truitt on March 17th of 1931. She attended Portsmouth High School and later married William Davis in 1946, also in Ohio. Colleen was estranged from her family, making it difficult to piece her later life together. Many questions remain now that Colleen has her name back, such as if she had any children or how she ended up slain in the Arizona desert. The Mojave County Sheriff's Office urges anyone who might have information about Colleen's life or what happened to her to call them at 928-753-0753 or their toll-free number at 1-800-522-43 1-2. On June 15th of 1986, a fisherman discovered a human skull by the Morrisville boat ramp in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. The fisherman took the skull to the Buckingham Township Police. The skull was the only remains located. It was determined that the victim was most likely white, but authorities were unsure about the gender or precise age except that this was an adult younger than 70. For many years, investigators worked to try to identify the unknown person, but were unable to, and the case went cold. Then, in September of 2022, the skull was sent to a forensic genealogy company called Othram for DNA testing. Othram first determined the skull belonged to a man. Then, they linked him thanks to his now grown daughter contributing DNA to a public genealogy database, which resulted in a potential match. The Bucks County detectives spoke to the DNA contributor, a 49-year-old Florida woman, on January 4th of 2023. The woman told detectives that she was 11 years old when her father, Richard Thomas Alt, went missing in Trenton, Pennsylvania. She said that her father's girlfriend's life was taken in 1985, and her father had not been seen since. The woman shared her DNA results from the genealogy website, and Othram confirmed the father-daughter link. Thus, it was confirmed that the skull belonged to Richard Thomas Alt. Bucks County District Attorney Matt Weintraub had this to say about the identification. "I can't even imagine wondering and worrying about a lost family member for even a day, let alone for 37 years. That wait is now over for Mr. Alt's family. I'm just glad that we could give them some peace of mind with this identification, and the eventual return of his remains to his family. This would not have been possible but for the technical expertise that Othram provided us for free. I hope that this powerful combination of technology and genealogy becomes the template for solving cold and current cases now and in the future." Richard Thomas Alt was 31 when he was reported missing to New Jersey's Trenton Police Department in early 1985. He was last seen on Christmas Eve of 1984 by his parents. His girlfriend, Lori Sydom's body was found in the Delaware River in April of 1985. Investigators are now working to see who is responsible for taking the lives of Richard and Lori. An injured woman was spotted on the west side of Highway 91 near Newton, Georgia on May 14th of 1985. A passerby who spotted her took the unidentified woman to a hospital. The woman succumbed to her injuries on June 1st of 1985. The examiner's office could not determine how she was injured, but listed the causes as subdural hematoma secondary to blunt force trauma to the head. They were also unable to identify her, and so her identity would remain unknown for some time. In 2012, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation exhumed the woman's remains. A bone fragment was sent for analysis, but produced no leads. In 2022, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation Sylvester Regional Investigative Office, in partnership with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, submitted a portion of the remains to the private DNA lab, and you guessed it, Othram. After completing the DNA extraction, a profile was generated and given to the FBI for genealogical comparisons. Agents then determined that the unknown woman is Mary Anga Cowan after the DNA sample came up as a match with one of her children. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation had this to say in a statement: The research yielded a high probability that the unidentified woman was Mary Anga Cowan, aka Angie. Agents obtained DNA from one of Cowan's children, and the comparison indicated a parent-slash-child relationship. The assistance of the Baker County Sheriff's Office, Othram, and the FBI Atlanta and Baltimore offices were instrumental in identifying these remains and providing closure for the family. Mary's daughter, Angelique Hall, also spoke at the press conference in February of 2023. "I was 10 years old, and she was fun. And she was silly, and then one day she was gone. I knew she was gone," she added, "and I never imagined that they would find her. This is a shock from Georgia, finding out that not only was her body found, but that the town picked her up out of a ditch and took care of her last days. She was loved, and I hear that she was buried." Investigators are still trying to determine what events led to Mary being fatally injured in 1985. On September 10th of 1987, a grandfather and his grandson were squirrel hunting in the woods off the 2200 block of Liberty Road near Mount Hope Cemetery in Youngstown, Ohio. Sadly, their bonding time together was cut short by the discovery of a human skull and other bones laying on the surface. The Youngstown Police Department was called to the scene and thus began an investigation into identifying the remains. The Youngstown State University of Anthropology Department helped investigators. They were able to determine that the remains most likely belonged to a black male between 30 and 44 years of age who had perhaps been in those woods for 3 to 5 years. Unfortunately, no further evidence was available and no leads came to fruition, so the case went cold. The unknown male was named the Youngstown John Doe. In August of 2021, a young woman called the Youngstown Police Department to speak to investigators. Her name is Elisa Yelkin. She had been a student of anthropology in the early 2000s and remembers seeing the skull and bones in the laboratory. Elisa could not get the thought out of her mind that the Youngstown John Doe was someone's child. She wanted to ensure that the Youngstown Police Department continued the investigation and did everything within their power to bring it to a conclusion. Detective Sergeant David P. Sweeney then took the lead on the case. In the latter part of 2021, the remains were sent to the Ohio Attorney General's Bureau of Criminal Investigation in order to extract DNA. Then, the Youngstown John Doe was entered into the NamUs, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, and a new facial reconstruction was created. Detective Sergeant Sweeney additionally went around the city distributing flyers and asking for tips. The decision was then finally made to send some of the remains to Othram Inc. to see if they could generate new leads in the investigation. In January of 2023, Youngstown Police Department received communication from the Othram team that funding was available for the case via the Porchlight Project. The Porchlight Project began in 2018 and is a privately funded organization which assists agencies, specifically in Ohio, with advanced DNA testing and genetic genealogy. Othram was able to successfully develop a DNA extract from the skeletal remains using forensic-grade genome sequencing to build a comprehensive DNA profile suitable for genealogical analysis. The leads were returned to law enforcement and further researched by Detective Sergeant Sweeney, the Mahoning County Coroner's Office, and BCI, which affirmed what the genetic genealogy research uncovered: a conclusive and definitive identification of Youngstown John Doe. In February of 2023, it was announced that Robert Earl Sanders is the Youngstown John Doe. He was reported missing on August 13th of 1976, a full 11 years before his remains were found in the woods. Robert was only 23 years old when he lost his life. Elisa Yelkin, who is the anthropology student who got the ball rolling on the case, spoke at the press conference. "We have all met someone in our lives that sticks with us. It's just their face, their attitude, whoever they are, you can't forget them. In the early 2000s, I saw my person in a forensic anthropology class. He wasn't sitting next to me though, rather, he was in front of me in what appeared to be a lost and found box with the most amazing smile I'd ever seen. I wondered forever who he was. I wondered what he looked like, and it haunted me. Anyone with information regarding Robert Earl Sanders is encouraged to contact the Youngstown Police Department at 330-742-8900. In March of 1998, a Loleta, California resident and his father were searching the Eel River by boat for driftwood when they located what appeared to be human remains in the river near Cock Robin Island. Sheriff's deputies responded via jet boat and discovered the remains. The unknown person was found to be partially clothed and was in advanced stages of decomposition. Following this recovery, an autopsy was conducted, and it was determined the remains had been in the water for approximately 1 month. The cause was listed as possible drowning. The deceased was described by investigators only as being a white male adult, 5 foot 10 inches tall, about 170 pounds, and likely 35 to 45 years old. This description did not match any reported missing persons from Northern California. During the investigation, the California Department of Justice was able to recover one latent fingerprint, which was ran through the automated latent print system but received no matches. A forensic dental examination was completed by a local dentist. A DNA sample was obtained and entered into both the California Missing Persons DNA database and the National Unidentified Persons DNA Index. The case was entered into NamUs as well. The DNA profile was routinely searched against profiles from both missing persons and other human remains in the combined index system, CODIS. But, unfortunately, no profile matches were ever made. In December of 2022, the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office and the California Department of Justice partnered with Othram, Inc. With funding provided by Road to Justice, the DOJ sent Othram a DNA extract from the unknown man's remains. Once the DNA profile was built, Othram's in-house genealogy team used forensic genetic genealogy to produce investigative leads. In mid-February of 2023, the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office received the Othram report indicating the DNA profile may belong to Jeffery Todd Sydow, born in 1963. The report included several genetic relatives, including a possible sister named Cheryl from Missouri. Investigators were able to contact Cheryl, who confirmed that she did have a brother named Jeffery Todd Sydow. Cheryl told investigators that for unknown reasons, Jeffery stopped communicating with family members. Their last contact with him was in the mid-1990s. Over the years, Cheryl had to try to reach out to Jeffery, but could not locate him. As the family was not sure whether the loss of contact was intentional, Jeffery was never reported as a missing person. The DOJ was able to compare the one latent print with the fingerprints known to be Jeffery's and got a positive match. Family members of Jeffery requested that his remains be released from the Humboldt County Coroner's Office for burial with other deceased family members. The Sheriff's Office thanked the California Department of Justice DNA Lab and Othram for their outstanding work and assistance in solving this case and providing the Sydow family with some closure for their missing loved one. Anyone with information regarding Jeffery Todd Sydow and his last known activities or whereabouts, or any information at all that may assist in the investigation of any open missing persons cases, it is asked to contact HCSO Cold Investigator Mike Fridley at 707-441-3024. In December of 2021, a shoe containing a foot was found near the mouth of the Elwha River in Port Angeles, Washington. The discovery was made by an individual who reported what he had observed to the Clallam County Sheriff's Office. Investigators activated search and rescue in the area and recovered the shoe several hours later. Investigators observed that the shoe's label was a woman's size 8 New Balance brand shoe. Due to the limited recovery of the woman's remains, investigators were unable to make a definitive determination about the woman's age, ethnicity, height, weight, hair color, or eye color during her life. Since the discovery of the unknown woman's remains, investigators diligently pursued various leads about her identity. Despite efforts, the woman's identity remained a mystery. With few leads for investigators to pursue, the case eventually went cold. In 2022, the Clallam County Sheriff's Office partnered with Othram to determine if advanced forensic DNA testing could help establish an identity for the woman or a close relative. Othram built a comprehensive genealogical profile, and then Othram's in-house genealogy team used the profile and genealogical research to produce investigative leads that were returned to the agency. The Clallam County Sheriff's Office Criminal Investigations Bureau received information from Othram, and the sheriff's detectives contacted one of the surviving family members who voluntarily provided a DNA sample which was sent to Othram Labs for comparison. Shortly thereafter, Othram confirmed that the foot belonged to a resident of Sequim, Washington. She is Jerilyn L. Smith, who was reported missing on January 7th of 2018. Jerilyn was 68 years old at the time of her disappearance. Surviving family members were grateful to the Clallam County Sheriff's Office, Othram Labs, and the citizens who generously crowdfunded the familial DNA work performed by Othram. Anyone with information that could aid in this investigation is encouraged to contact the Clallam County Sheriff's Office by calling the tip line at 360-417-2540 and referencing agency case 201-000-23819. Madeleine Beth McCann's disappearance has been described as the most heavily reported missing person case in modern history. There have been countless theories across the nearly 16 years she went missing. Many believe her parents Kate and Jerry McCann or their friends are responsible. Others were convinced that Robert Murat was involved. He lived just 150 yards away from apartment 5A in Praia da Luz, Portugal, where Madeleine was last seen in 2007. Other than conflicting statements made by him, there was nothing linking him to the disappearance. A series of burglaries that took place near apartment 5A in the days before Madeleine went missing was then focused on. A group of men pretending to collect donations for an orphanage as a ploy to gain access to homes in the area. Nothing concrete was found that any of these men took Madeleine. In June of 2020, it seemed like the mystery was finally solved. Police in Germany ordered an inquiry regarding the possible involvement of then 43-year-old Christian Bruckner. I made a video at the time discussing all the reasons investigators believed that he was the one that took Madeleine. To sum it up in a sentence, he has committed similar crimes. He was in the same area at the time, and he gave investigators false statements. German authorities claim that they have concrete evidence that Christian Bruckner took Madeleine's life, but they have not made all the information public, and it appears that the investigation is still ongoing. These, of course, are not all of the theories, but it does bring us to the most recent one, Julia Wendell. In February of 2023, a Polish woman, Julia Wendell, came forward stating that she believed she might be Madeleine. There have been quite a few women that have claimed they are Madeleine, so it wasn't big news at first. Now let's go over everything we know about Julia and why she believes that she is in fact Madeleine. Julia grew up in Wrocław, Poland. Here is a picture of her taken during her childhood, next to a picture of Madeleine. She claims that she does not remember large parts of her childhood, and that she was never treated as part of the family by her parents or siblings. Other quote-unquote evidence she has put forward includes a speck in her eye like Madeleine, and her allegedly overhearing her mom admit to taking her. Where it gets really interesting is, she also said she was abused by a German man who resembled a one-time suspect in Madeleine's disappearance. She supposedly found a family photo of that man in an older relative's house. I couldn't find any information if she's referring to Christian Bruckner or not. A private detective working on the case in Poland said that they could find no hospital records for Julia relating to the first 5 years of her life. Julia's family in Poland have denied her claims. Her mom and dad have also blocked Julia's number and are refusing to take DNA tests of their own. Julia received many death threats after she went viral on Instagram, sharing that she believed she is Madeleine. Julia then went to California for her own safety. Julia is staying with a private detective and self-professed medium Dr. Fia Johansson at a safe house in California. Dr. Johansson said Julia has sent off 3 DNA samples for forensic analysis, as well as a genetic test to establish her ancestry. If the results come back that she's British or from that area, then we are going to continue our investigation into Madeleine McCann and communicate with the detectives in Portugal, Dr. Johansson said. We have a lot of evidence right now that shows Julia was definitely trafficked to Poland. We are still conducting an investigation, but Julia is definitely not the biological daughter of her parents in Poland. Dr. Johansson also said it was so strange because everything in Julia's health book, everything, started at the age of 5. So everything between the ages of 0 months to 5 years, everything is missing. And there is no signature by a doctor showing that they had removed any of the records from her file. She just doesn't exist during that time frame. Internet users have also speculated that Wendell could be the Swiss girl Livia Schlepp, who disappeared in 2011 with her twin Alicia, aged 6. As this is still ongoing, I plan to make a new video when the results of the DNA tests are made public. Until then, please do let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section. Is Julia really Madeleine? Perhaps another missing woman, or just simply Julia Wendell? On November 28th of 1992, unidentified human remains belonging to a male were discovered near the Walker Wildlife Area off River Road in Mesa County, Colorado. These remains were missing the skull and were decomposed. The remains showed evidence that the unidentified male had been stabbed. For 3 decades, since the discovery of the man's remains, investigators diligently pursued various leads in hopes of uncovering his identity. In January of 2011, the case was entered into the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. In spite of investigative effort, all leads were exhausted and the case went cold. It would remain that way until 2022. It was then that the Mesa County Sheriff's Office collaborated with Othram Inc. to determine if advanced forensic DNA testing could help establish an identity for the man or a close relative. A DNA Solves crowdfund was then created to cover the costs associated with laboratory testing and genetic genealogy research. Skeletal evidence was sent to Othram's lab in the Woodlands, Texas. There, forensic scientists developed a DNA extract and used forensic-grade genome sequencing to build a comprehensive DNA profile for the unidentified man. Further investigation by Mesa County Sheriff's Office investigators led them to finding a potential sibling to the unknown man. The sibling agreed to share consumer DNA data that was then compared to the unknown profile by Othram, which confirmed a sibling relationship. The male victim was then finally identified in February of 2023 as Etus Thomas Romero. His nickname was E.T. E.T. was 26 years old when his life was taken. He was a military veteran and had a tattoo of the initials E.T. He was a resident of New Iberia, Louisiana. Investigators traveled to Louisiana and learned that E.T. had reportedly traveled with two other persons from Louisiana to Grand Junction, Colorado around October in 1991. He had lived in a home on 4th Street between Ute and Pitkins Avenue. E.T. also reportedly worked as a dishwasher at a local restaurant. Investigators believed that his life was taken in the summer of 1992. Anyone with any information regarding this case is encouraged to contact investigator Pete Berg at 970-244-3263 or investigator Anthony West at 970-244-3270. Kristen Middleman, Chief Business Development Officer at Othram Inc., had this to say: "Whenever a case has DNA evidence there that is not leading to a hit with CODIS and is intraceable with other methods, we're able to come in and build one of these profiles that has hundreds and hundreds of thousands of markers in it uploaded to a genealogical database consented for law enforcement use. Then, we're able to figure out where the person belongs in a family tree." On January 3rd of 1979, a duck hunter discovered human remains belonging to a male entangled in fishing line on the Tide Flats near Spencer Island just south of Marysville, Washington. The Snohomish County Coroner's Office called the victim John Doe 79-1 because he was the first John Doe found of that year. The Snohomish County Coroner, Robert Phillips, could not determine what happened to the John Doe. By March of 1979, the man was still not identified, so the Cassidy Funeral Home buried him at Cypress Lawn Cemetery in Everett, Washington. The Snohomish County Sheriff's Office later returned to the scene where the remains were found, but did not find anything useful. In the years that followed, the case grew cold. In 2008, Detective Jim Scharf with the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office Cold Case Team and retired Snohomish County Superior Court Judge Ken Kausert began re-examining the unidentified persons case. With the emergence of new DNA technologies, the team was interested in exhuming the remains with the hopes of obtaining DNA samples that were not taken during the initial exams. The process of identifying and reviewing the cases, obtaining exhumation permits, and conducting DNA testing can take years. In July of 2015, the John Doe's remains were exhumed from the Cypress Lawn, with representatives from the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office and the Medical Examiner's Office in attendance. The remains were then transported to the Medical Examiner's Office for further examination and given the name Spencer Island Doe. Also, in July of 2015, forensic odontologist Dr. Kyle Tanaka took dental radiographs and uploaded them to NCIC and NamUs in the hopes of getting a dental match with a known missing person. NCIC is the FBI's National Crime Information Center database, which is a computerized index that tracks crimes and missing persons, and allows other law enforcement jurisdictions across the country to view details about the case and compare them against their own missing persons cases. No NCIC dental matches were made. In April of 2016, forensic artist Natalie Murray took measurements and photographs and drew a facial reconstruction of what the John Doe may have looked like in life. In April of 2016, Dr. Kathy Taylor, the Washington State forensic anthropologist at the King County Medical Examiner's Office, performed an examination of the remains and estimated that they belonged to an adult male with Caucasian ancestry between 5'2" and 5'6" in height and between 27 and 61 years old. In September of 2018, a section of the right femur was sent to the University of North Texas Health Sciences Center for DNA extraction and was uploaded to the FBI's Combined DNA Index system. From 2018 to 2021, the Snohomish County Medical Examiner investigators ruled out numerous missing persons by circumstances, testing, and dental records. In 2021, the Medical Examiner's Office began collaborating with Othram Inc. to obtain an advanced DNA profile suitable for investigative genetic genealogy. In January of 2021, a section of the femur bone from Spencer Island John Doe was sent to Othram. The funding for the laboratory work in this case was generously provided through DNAsolves.com. In May of 2021, Othram successfully obtained a DNA extract that was sufficient for testing after multiple rounds of extraction and human enrichment. Biogeographical analysis of the DNA profile revealed that the John Doe was in fact Caucasian. The Snohomish County Medical Examiner's Office uploaded the Othram DNA profile to genealogical databases that allow law enforcement to search and obtain several matches. Adam Wilcoxon built ancestry trees from several of the top matches and found a male who went missing in the Everett, Washington area in the late 1970s named Gary Lee Haynie. DNA reference testing of Gary's half-sister ultimately confirmed that Spencer Island Doe was Gary Lee Haynie, who was about 29 years old when he went missing. The identification was made in March of 2023. Gary was apparently not reported missing, or at least investigators found no record of that. He was born in Topeka, Kansas, and traveled the world with his mother and adoptive father, who was in the Air Force. Gary loved the Beatles and to play the piano. His parents both passed away when he was young, and he got estranged from the rest of his relatives, so the only photos of him are as a child. The circumstances of his disappearance are not known. Gary's cousin Hal Thane, from Texas, was able to provide a lot of information. He said, "It is a relief and closure to know about Gary." He also said that Gary Lee Haynie was born Gary Joseph Condomiti on September 23rd of 1950. His mother, Bernice Schaefer, and his biological father divorced when he was very young. Around 1955, his mother remarried to Sheldon Lee Haynie, who adopted him and renamed him Gary Lee Haynie, legally changing even his middle name to match his stepfather. Hal Thane, now 71, saw his cousin Gary in person maybe twice in his life when they were both kids. His uncle Sheldon served in the Air Force, so the family lived in places all across the country from Kansas to New York City. His clearest memories of his cousin are captured in a few precious black and white pictures. Young Gary cradling a Cocker Spaniel puppy. Young Gary holding a bigger dog's leash beside his mother in a pale dress and his stepfather in a white dress shirt and slacks. Young Gary with his front teeth peeking out from a half smile on what looks like a school picture day. Hal Thane said Gary had some sort of a mental disorder. Given what he knows, he wonders if Gary lived with autism. He'd heard another family member describe him as schizophrenic in adulthood. Gary's biological father, Joseph Condomiti, passed away at a Missouri Veterans Hospital when Gary was about 16. Then his mother passed away when he was 19. His adoptive father, meanwhile, finished his military service and worked for Boeing until he was ready to retire. He lived in the Everett area from the early 1970s until at least 1990. If you have any information, please call the Snohomish Police Department at 360-568-0888.
In March of 1995, an individual recycling in the unincorporated community of Holt in San Joaquin County, California, located a partially submerged refrigerator in an irrigation canal off Bacon Island Road. Inside the refrigerator was a woman's body. Investigators at the time believed the woman had been entombed in the refrigerator underwater for several months, leading to an advanced state of decomposition. The female was described as Caucasian with strawberry blonde hair, 110 to 130 pounds, with an approximate age of 29 to 41. For nearly 27 years, San Joaquin County Sheriff's Office investigators tried to identify the victim, who was named the lady in the fridge. Despite the exhaustive efforts of law enforcement, the woman's identity remained a mystery. After exhausting all leads for investigators to pursue, the case eventually went cold. Over the years, many investigative and scientific techniques have either been improved or created through new technological advances. One of those methods is investigative genealogy, which combines DNA analysis with traditional genealogy research and historical records to generate investigative leads for unsolved violent crimes. In 2022, San Joaquin County Sheriff's Office and the San Joaquin County Medical Examiner's Office partnered with Othram to determine if advanced forensic DNA testing could help establish an identity for the woman or a close relative. Skeletal evidence was sent to Othram's lab, where their forensic scientists developed a DNA extract and used forensic-grade genome sequencing to build a comprehensive DNA profile for the unknown female. In addition, Othram's in-house genealogy team used forensic genetic genealogy to produce investigative leads, which were returned to San Joaquin County Sheriff's Office investigators. A follow-up investigation contacting the victim's possible mother and daughter was made. They provided their DNA sample to compare, confirming the identification of Amanda Lynn Schumann Deza, born August 11th of 1965. Now that Amanda has been identified in February of 2003, investigators are looking for clues to her disappearance. They know that Amanda was separated from her husband and that they had 3 young children at the time of her disappearance. Speaking with family, she was last seen at an unknown apartment complex in the city of Napa with an unidentified male she met in a rehabilitation facility. Investigators are calling upon the public for assistance and encourage anyone with information about Amanda Lynn Schumann Deza or possible details surrounding her demise to reach out to San Joaquin County Sheriff's Office. You may contact them at 209-468-5087 or by email at coldcase@sjgov.org. 22-year-old Cheyann Klus was always a very upbeat and outgoing young woman from Chicago. Her social media accounts were filled with selfies and memes. On January 13th of 2016, her mother, who she was very close with, unfortunately passed away. Then, shortly after that, Cheyann also lost her beloved dog. As you can imagine, this was a very hard time for her. On September 4th of 2016, she posted on her Facebook, "Unfortunately, just lost another part of our family, my puppy Micah. I had the opportunity to have you as my best friend for 11 years of my life. Go get mom and keep her company up there. I love you." Cheyann became depressed, and you could see how much she was suffering on Facebook posts she was making. She began hanging out with people that weren't good for her. One of these people was 31-year-old Gabe Sidicase. At one point, Cheyann and Gabe were arrested. She was charged with obstructing identification and illegal transport of alcohol, while Gabe was charged with possession of a controlled substance. On the night of November 27th of 2017, Cheyann left her home with her laptop and a few pieces of clothing. She then went to the house of 38-year-old Brian Biddle. While there, Brian posted photos of Cheyann on her Facebook. The two of them spent most of their time partying and drinking together. Early morning on November 29th of 2017, a friend of Cheyann named Chad Chanapai received a few texts and calls from Cheyann. He woke up 20 minutes after her last message. Chad saw that Cheyann desperately wanted a lift from him and that it seemed like she wanted to get out of Brian's house. Chad tried calling her, but there was no answer. He then called Brian, who told him that he slept for 18 hours after all the drinking, and when he woke up, Cheyann was gone. The day of when she actually was reported missing does not seem to be known. Some sources stated that it was on December 1st of 2017, while others say it is December 11th or December 12th. It is known that Cheyann's father was the one that reported her missing. On December 11th of 2017, a 911 call was made from Cheyann's phone. The person who made the call immediately hung up. It is not known if it was Cheyann who made the phone call or someone else using her phone. Police were able to trace the call to Mallard Lake Forest Preserve, about 20 miles from Brian's house. The police searched the area extensively. They found a couple of items, but nothing that could be linked to Cheyann's disappearance at all. The police stated that Brian Biddle is not a suspect and that he has been cooperating with them. He let them search his home, phone, computer, and other personal devices. Many people believed that Brian is involved. He is a known drug addict. After Cheyann disappeared, he was arrested for having a firearm and narcotics. He is also the last person to have seen her. There are also people who think that their friend Chad Chanapai might be involved in her disappearance. It appeared like he was friend-zoned and cared more for Cheyann than she did for him. In his interview with Crime Watch Daily, he made it clear how he disliked the fact that Cheyann was with other men like Brian and Gabe. It should also be noted that on the day the 911 call was made from Cheyann's phone, Chad put up this post on his Facebook account. Also on his Facebook, you'll see that pretty much all of his posts are about Cheyann, even before she disappeared. Then, on January 16th of 2023, Cheyann's family posted on social media that her remains had been found. Cheyanne's sister, Mariah Klus, posted this on Facebook. Dear friends and family, on behalf of the Klus family, we would like to extend our appreciation to the DuPage and Cook County Sheriff's Departments, as well as other agencies involved in the search for Cheyann. We have been looking for Cheyann and information related to her disappearance since she went missing 5 years ago. While it was not the news we were hoping for, we have received confirmation from law enforcement that Cheyann's remains have been found. As her immediate family, father, sisters, brothers, nephews, are in mourning, we ask for privacy as we grieve the unbearable loss of a daughter, sister, aunt, and a wonderful human being. Cook County Sheriff's Office did not provide information about where or how Cheyann's remains were located. In a statement, it said the Sheriff's Office worked closely with the DuPage County Sheriff's Office and the FBI to successfully identify the remains of Cheyann Klus through dental records last week. The Sheriff's Office will continue to work with Chicago police to investigate the circumstances, but we are grateful to help bring some measure of closure to the Klus family. On June 19th of 1986, the bones of an elderly woman were discovered buried in a shallow grave in a rural area near Grants Pass. Along with the skeleton was fabric, a worn set of dentures, and the rubber stoppers found at the end of a mobility walker. The property owner at the time, who had bought the property 12 years previously, stated there had always been a dip in the ground where the grave was discovered. The evidence was sent to the Oregon State Medical Examiner's office, where it was determined that the body belonged to a woman around 62 to 63 years old, who had lost her life around 15 to 25 years before the grave site was found. The Josephine County Sheriff's Office investigated the case for several years, but nothing viable was found. The dentures were investigated in an attempt to identify via dental records, but this also did not lead to anything meaningful for investigators. From 1986 to 2015, over 29 years, the case was regularly visited and reworked, but nothing resulted in a lead. Finally, in 2016, genetic genealogy began to come into play. A bone sample was sent to the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification for processing and uploading into the National DNA Database CODIS. However, the sample was said to be too degraded with bacteria to be successfully processed. In 2018, another attempt was made. This time, a partial DNA profile was successfully entered into CODIS. The profile was checked weekly for matches, but no genetic associations were found. Another sample was submitted, and in October of 2020, a DNA profile was successfully made and analyzed. The profile was able to provide a phenotype report. The unknown woman had very fair skin, hazel eyes, and brown to dark blonde hair. The report also graded the case with a very high solvability rating, given the circumstances, evidence, and researchers available. The ball was now rolling, and the genetic profile in the database began receiving all sorts of dings, matches with genetically close relatives to the woman. Investigators began putting together a profile rooted in genetic genealogy, an extensive and well-documented family history with genetic links to 4 distinct family lines, leading to a family of 9 children raised in Nez Perce, Idaho. 6 daughters belonged to this family, and 5 daughters all had documentation and record of when and how they passed away. 1 daughter did not have any of these records. Elsie Marie Baker, born May 6th of 1896. Elsie and her husband Frank moved from Idaho to Jackson, Oregon by 1950, and are confirmed to have lived in Rogue River Precinct 77. Frank filed for divorce from Elsie in May of 1955, and it was granted in June of 1956. Frank passed away 2 years later in 1958. Elsie disappeared at some point after May of 1955, and public family trees reported Elsie passing in Grants Pass, Oregon around 1955. However, Elsie was documented as receiving treatment for cancer on June 13th of 1959 at the Josephine General Hospital. Investigators concluded Elsie had passed away under potentially suspicious circumstances sometime after 1959. Elsie's only child had 9 children of her own, and it was these grandchildren that finally tied the case together. One of the grandchildren had an extensive family tree online and agreed to an oral swab for testing. The results were definitive. It was confirmed that it was Elsie Marie Baker's remains that were found. Dr. Nikki Vance, Human Identification Program Coordinator, said, "The Oregon State Medical Examiner's Office is honored and humbled to have worked with Josephine County Sheriff's Office and Parabon Nanolabs to resolve this decades-old mystery. At this time, nothing is known about how she came to be buried in a remote corner of the property. But through the process of science and dedication of investigators, Elsie has her name and her family has its answers." On May 13th of 1997, an archaeologist from the University of Illinois was working a construction landfill in Rockdale, Illinois when he located a human bone. Further investigation by the Will County Sheriff's Office resulted in numerous human skeletal remains, most of which had been broken and were at various layers of the fill, but all within the construction debris. The debris was mainly brick, stone, and wood. The debris came from a building in Joliet, Illinois, known as the Rust Craft Building, a square block long and wide, 3 stories tall, with a full basement. The building housed various companies since it opened in 1907, including a card-making company with large printing presses, and from 1986 to 1992, the building was abandoned. The abandoned building suffered a fire in 1992, which burned for 2 days, and ultimately resulted in its demolition. Prior to its demolition, the building was known to be frequented by the local homeless population and was known to be a high-crime area. Following the demolition, excess debris was removed from the site, while the rest was used to fill the building's basement. In 1995, the building's remnants were excavated and relocated to a second location in Rockdale. It was there that the bones would later be discovered, intermingled with brick, stone, and other building materials. Following the discovery of the bones, pathologists determined that they had been disturbed twice post-mortem prior to their discovery, indicating that they were present at the original factory location. Only partial skeletal remains were recovered, yet pathologists were still able to estimate a few things about the unknown woman. She was determined to be between the ages of 15 and 24 years old, and to have stood between 5 feet and 5 foot 10 inches tall. No conclusive determinations were made about the woman's weight, hair color, or eye color. Investigators believe she lost her life sometime after 1986, but prior to the Rustcraft building's demolition. In 2009, the Will County coroner Patrick K. O'Neill formed a cold case unit which began to work to identify the unknown woman. Over the years, forensic anthropology studies were completed, DNA was developed and entered into the National Missing and Unidentified Persons databases, and the profile was submitted into CODIS. Facial reconstruction was completed by a specialized FBI unit. As a result, numerous leads were developed, but ultimately eliminated. After Lori Summers was elected coroner in 2020, she continued to support the work of the cold case unit, encouraging genomic research and agreeing to fund that aspect of these investigations. In 2022, the Will County Coroner's Office partnered with Othram with the goal of using advanced forensic DNA testing to identify the woman or a close relative. Will County Coroner's Office contributed some of the funding to support advanced DNA testing, and DNA Solves crowdfund was set up to fund the rest. The case was particularly challenging in that advanced DNA testing had failed in previous attempts with the remains. Othram developed a suitable DNA extract from the skeletal remains and used forensic-grade genome sequencing to build a comprehensive genealogical profile. Othram's in-house genetic genealogy team performed the genealogical research necessary to produce an investigative lead for law enforcement. Once the leads were returned to law enforcement, cold case investigators interviewed several people in Illinois, Texas, and California. Othram narrowed the search through additional DNA profiling and genealogy studies to one person in California. Their investigation indicated that this person could be a brother of the unidentified woman. Cold case investigators from the coroner's office interviewed this man and determined that he has a sister that he had last had contact with in 1984 and was never seen again. Subsequent testing indicated this man and the unidentified are related as half-siblings. The unidentified was then identified as Marie R. O'Brien from Aurora, Illinois in March of 2023. Additional investigations continue by both the Will County coroner and the Will County Sheriff's cold case investigators. If anyone has any information that could aid this investigation, they are encouraged to contact the Will County Coroner's Office at 815-727-8255 8455.